Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our special COVID-19 Scams panel. My name is John Breyault. I am Vice President of Public Policy, Telecommunications, and Fraud at the National Consumers League. We are a nonprofit consumer advocacy organization based in DC. And I am incredibly pleased this morning to be joined by Attorney General Josh Shapiro from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. General Shapiro, thank you so much for making time for us today.
Good to be with you. Thanks for having me. And thanks for your good work.
Oh, thank you so much. I don't think you need much introduction, but General Shapiro was elected in 2016 and follows in the footsteps of John Elgin, who was the Attorney General of Pennsylvania when NCL was founded back in 1899. So I just thought that was a neat little trivia bit.
That's a fun fact there.
It is, you know. So let's jump right into it. The Federal Trade Commission has reported a dramatic spike in complaints around scammers using COVID-19 and the stimulus bill to defraud consumers. Can you talk about what you're seeing on the ground in Pennsylvania? And is this similar to what the FTC is seeing nationally? And then what is your office doing to protect consumers from these scams?
Yeah, John, thanks for asking the question. And sincerely, thank you for the good work that you're doing to protect consumers all across this country. And, you know, we recognize that a huge part of the effort to protect consumers is being able to get the word out and informing and educating folks. And John, that's what you guys are doing. So thank you very, very much for that work. We appreciate you. I can tell you that here in Pennsylvania, we're seeing, of course, we're seeing similar trends regarding scams, and in particular around the stimulus checks and other federal monies. When the feds are pumping out as much money as they are, the good news is the vast majority of Pennsylvanians are behaving responsibly, but there are some scammers out there trying to take advantage of people. We've received a number of complaints to our office, and specifically the kinds of complaints about scams we're seeing on these stimulus checks are someone calling or sending an unsolicited email encouraging you to give over your bank account information so you can get your check quicker, or just calling to confirm your personal information so that they can process the check and get it to you. And John, I know you've said this many times, and I'll say it again for everyone watching. The IRS isn't going to call you in an unsolicited manner that way. They're not going to demand personal information over the phone. And what we want people to know is, you know, if you direct deposited your IRS, refund in prior years, your money's going to be deposited directly into your account and presumably already has. And for those who don't do it that way, a check likely has been mailed to you or will be mailed to you soon. And so we just want you to know that there's also a helpful device on the IRS website to be able to go and track your payment. Here's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get our Office of Public Engagement, something I started 3 years ago when I became Attorney General, to just get out there and inform people through Zoom meetings, through we have scam text alerts, through other different means to alert people as to what those scams are and how to avoid them. The public education piece of this is so important. And then the final piece I just want to mention, and then I'll turn it back to you, John. Sorry to go on and on here, but I get passionate about this stuff.
You're the star here.
And, we recognize that there's sort of two pieces of this, right? One is making sure that the Pennsylvania consumer is made whole, right? That they get their money back, or we stop them from giving over that personal information, or we're able to figure out a way to shield their money. But another part of this for us is we want to find that scammer, and we want to try and track them down. And sometimes it's impossible, but other times using certain cyber techniques, we can trace them down. And so we've partnered with the United States attorneys in both the Eastern District, which is like near Philadelphia, and the Western District, which is near Pittsburgh, to be able to work utilizing some of their cyber techniques to be able to go and find these scammers and shut them down. So from a law enforcement perspective, we're acting. From a public education perspective, we're acting. We're trying to do everything we can to help people.
Yeah, and I think consumers in Pennsylvania and around the country are super grateful for the work that you and your team are doing, both on the law enforcement side as well as on the public engagement side. But I'll tell you, we hear at NCL, we run a website called fraud.org, where we hear from thousands of consumers every year And one of the things that keeps coming up in our conversations is that people sometimes feel powerless and a little frustrated, and they worry about, what do if I file a complaint, what's going to be done with it? Will these guys get put behind bars? And we have to have conversations with them about what happens to these complaints and things like that, and that not everyone leads to a prosecution, but as a group they do. So what would you tell consumers in Pennsylvania who get approached by one of these scammers to do? Should they be reaching out to your office, local law enforcement, someone else?
Yeah, John, first off, we have to recognize the reality that a lot of older Pennsylvanians are preyed upon, and they're preyed upon because they're alone, they're scared, they don't have access to maybe some of the information that you and I have, which is why this type of forum is so important. And now with the COVID-19 pandemic and the stay-at-home orders in place, a lot of those older Pennsylvanians are even more lonely and even more isolated. And so scammers are trying to take advantage of that. I think what people need to know if they think they may have been victims of a scam is two things. Number one, do not be embarrassed. It's okay. And number two, you're not alone. And you're not alone in two ways, right? One is we're here to help you. And number two, if it happened to you, it probably happened to someone else in Pennsylvania or someone else across this country. And so for us in law enforcement to get that information and then be able to not just help you get your money back or secure your personal information, but also be able to look at patterns and trends that exist with these scammers and hopefully be able to try and shut them down, that's very, very helpful to us. So by you alerting my office, you're actually helping not just yourself, but others who might fall victim to a scam. And we create a simple way for you to get in touch with us, right? You can go on my website, attorneygeneral.gov, and there is a button in the top right corner that's available on every page of my website that says submit a complaint. And I know this may be a shock to people, but we follow up on every single one of those complaints. I'll just give you a case in point. We've received 4,800 complaints about price gouging. We followed up on every single one of them, right? So we follow up on every one of these. If you prefer not to go on our website and you want to send us an email, you can just email us directly at scams@attorneygeneral.gov. We also have a helpful 1-800 number as well. Furthermore, if you alert us, then we can go and we can alert others through our texting program. We allow people to sign up to receive scam text alerts from us. And I want to be clear to anybody, listen, we don't keep your personal information. We don't use it for any purposes, governmental or otherwise. We don't sell your information. All we do is send you alerts about texts in your community, in your region, in your demographic group, whatever the case may be, so that you can be on alert. But look, don't be embarrassed. Let us know. We're here to help you. And by you letting us know, you're actually in a position where you can help others.
Yeah, that's such an important message. One of the things that we try and tell consumers who are victims of fraud all the time is that being a victim of fraud is no different from being a victim of any other crime. If you had your car stolen or someone broke into your house, you wouldn't hesitate to tell local law enforcement. And fraud is the same thing. It's a crime like any else, and reporting it is how we make everybody safer. So thank you for that message. One of the things I'm interested in. One of the things I'm interested in is an op-ed that you did earlier this month with the AARP State Director Bill Johnston Walsh. That was in the Erie Times News, and I underlined a quote in there. You called the current pandemic a, quote, target-rich environment for identity thieves and scammers. So what did you mean by that? And if there's sort of one thing that Pennsylvanians should be on the lookout for avoiding these scams, what should they be looking out for?
Yeah. Well, first off, we've had a tremendous partnership with AARP, with Bill and Mary and the whole team there. And it goes back to what I was saying, John, with organizations like yours and the AARP, being able to amplify this message to keep people safe is incredibly helpful. I mean, you all are helping law enforcement in really meaningful ways when you do this. So I want to say thank you for doing that work. Look, it's a target-rich environment for a couple of reasons I've mentioned here this morning. Number one, there's just a lot of money going around right now, and there's a lot of money being sent by the federal government, and in some cases by state governments, and so you've got to be careful. Number two, there's a lot of feelings of vulnerability right now. People are worried that they're going to get sick. People are worried if they are sick that they don't have the right medicines, and so we're seeing more and more scams pop up surrounding around healthcare and these miracle drugs and things like that. I put that in air quotes for those of you who are listening and not watching. There is no miracle drug here, no matter what anyone says, from the president to some, scammer online. Don't believe them. Listen to the medical experts. They're the ones that know, and there is not some miracle cure right now. And third, it's the reasons we talked about before. A lot of people being targeted are older Pennsylvanians, and they are shut in their homes, and they're scared, and they're feeling vulnerable. And when that phone rings or the unsolicited email comes through, the voice on the other end of the line or the other end of the email may seem very friendly and may offer some comfort back. But I guess what I really want to stress to people is don't accept that comfort from a stranger. And if you do, you are likely being duped. You are likely being scammed. And so, if you want to talk to someone, and I think it's important that you talk to people right now, I don't like the term social distancing. I think it should be physical distancing. We should maintain social contact, even if it's through a Zoom meeting like this. But we've got to make sure that our older Pennsylvanians and older Americans are looked after. Give them a call, reach out, make sure they have the comfort of knowing that people have their back and they're here and they're listening to them and they want to engage with them. And I think that stuff is really important and has the effect of stopping them from maybe, falling victim to one of those scams and engaging with someone that they really should.
Sure. And that makes total sense. You mentioned social distancing. I'd like to turn to another kind of social media.
Sure.
In a state like Pennsylvania that has tech hubs all over the place, people go online all the time. They may see messages or ads for sites that offer things like the cures that you talked about that really are nothing. I mean, I saw one just the other day. They were saying a CBD infused pill is going to help protect me from COVID.
Right.
What do you think is the role of tech in protecting consumers from these COVID-19 scams?
Well, we've been engaged with Facebook and Google and some of the other environments that are providing information to make sure that they're not, silencing voices that they disagree with or, playing political favorites. I mean, John, you and I can have our political viewpoints and that's fine. And it's good to share that, but it's got to be clear that we're sharing that in the context of what our political opinions are. When it comes to dealing with a pandemic like this and the resulting economic devastation that we've seen, the job losses and otherwise, people want facts. They want information. They want data from scientists and economists and things like that. And we need to make sure that those platforms are separating out fact from fiction or fact from opinion, not censoring speech. And I'll fight very hard against that, but making sure that it is clear. And so I have been working with a number of these social media platforms who are, putting up links to useful resources on COVID-19, which present factual, data-based information for people so that they know what they can rely on. More needs to be done, but those, that industry is stepping up and doing their part.
Great, thank you for that message. I just have, I know we're running a little short on time for you, but are you able to take just one question from our audience?
Sure. Yeah. Go ahead.
So one of our audience chimes in and asks, how can we reach older Americans and low-income Americans who are not online, people who can't get text or are afraid or don't have free time to get text messages? You talked about all the great stuff your Office of Public Engagement is doing, but how about people who are struggling to get online during this time?
Absolutely, and that's very real. Look, a number of the internet service providers have turned on free internet and different internet programs at deeply discounted rates so people can plug in. And there's information, I believe, on my website available. And I'm not here to push any one internet service provider over the other, but a number of them have it. And so I would encourage you, if you're digitally literate, you're comfortable in that environment, now is a good time to sign up and get that. And there's free technology devices for you to be able to communicate. Now's a really good time to do that. For those who don't, we are obviously limited in the amount of in-person education that we can do. And we typically have a unit that's going around communicating in person to seniors all the time. But, I'll tell you what, local newspapers are terrific. Bill and I, you referenced before, wrote that op-ed in the Erie newspaper. And, I know it was covered in other newspapers as well. Check your local newspaper. We're trying to put as much information as we can in there. Also, it's okay to pick up the phone and call a relative or call a friend and ask them to look something up for you, or confirm some information you may have heard from someone, or someone may have called you about, with someone who's online and can get accurate data.
Great. Well, General Shapiro, I want to thank you for not just for making time for this event today, but all the amazing work that you and your amazing staff at the Attorney General's office are doing to protect Pennsylvanians every day. Just looking over your press releases over the past month, I don't know how you all sleep at night doing everything you're doing to try and crack down on price gouging and people offering fake cures and things like that. So on behalf of myself, the National Consumers League, our Executive Director, Sally Greenberg, and consumers in Pennsylvania and across the country, thank you so much for all of that you're doing.
John, thank you. That's very nice of you. And I meant what I said earlier. It wasn't just, hyperbole. The work you're doing to get the word out is so important. And, there will be some people that hear my voice. There will be some people that hear your voice. The key is that collectively we're warning people about scams, and that we're working together to share actual information, not myths and not, propaganda by one group or the other. And so I just really want to thank you for being a responsible citizen, for doing your part. It makes a difference. And, with all the bad news, John, every day in the news, there's a lot of folks who are doing so much good. And, I'm reminded of what Mr. Rogers said, that in times of crisis, look for the helpers.
Look for the helpers.
John, you
exactly.
and the National Consumers League are among the great helpers out there. So thank you very much for what you're doing, and please stay safe.
Thank you. Same to you. Take care, General Shapiro.
Thank you. See you soon.
Okay. Now I'd like to invite our expert panel to join our call. So we'll just pause here for a moment while we bring them in. Hello, good morning, everyone. Hi, Lori and Andrew, and I see Mary there. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. There's Mary. Hi, Mary.
Good morning.
Good morning. Well, thank you so much for making time to join our chat this morning to talk about scams related to COVID-19. For folks watching on the live stream, I'm not going to go through everybody's biography. If you're interested, they're in the comment section below this video. But I can tell you that you have the privilege of having with us really some of the top experts on frauds and scams, not just in Pennsylvania, but around the country. So we have with us right now, Lori Craner. She is a professor at Carnegie Mellon and the director of the Scilab Security and Privacy Institute. Welcome, Lori.
Thank you.
We also have Mary Bach. She is the chair of the AARP Pennsylvania Consumer Issues Task Force. Hi, Mary.
Hello there, John. I'm waving my red flag against fraud.
Oh, good. And finally, we have Andrew Good, Esquire, who is the vice president of the Metro Philadelphia Better Business Bureau. Hi, Andrew.
Good morning. I left my flag back in my regular office, so nothing to wait.
Cool. Well, thank you all for being here and for what I hope is going to be a really important conversation about scams linked to the COVID-19 epidemic. So you all just heard from Attorney General Shapiro talking about what he is seeing from his office in the in Harrisburg. And your organizations are also on the front lines of fighting back against scams targeting Pennsylvanians. So what is the data telling you about what's happening on the ground?
Well, certainly very much the same kinds of things that the Attorney General's office is actually seeing. Although we know in Pennsylvania and probably nationwide that a lot of the scams go underreported or unreported. And that is definitely a concern. We want people to know that at AARP, the Fraud Watch Network has wonderful tools. We believe that if you can spot a scam, you can stop a scam. And as the Attorney General said, we want people to be educated about what to look for. And there are scams out there that people can find out about if they go to aarp.org/fraudwatchnetwork. It is free of charge. You can actually get alerts about the latest frauds and scams. And we have a scam tracking map where people can log on to Pennsylvania and they can follow what people like all of us are saying about scams that are occurring in Pennsylvania, and they can report what's happening to them. We also strongly believe that they should be reporting to the Attorney General's office. But even if you're just getting phone calls or phishing type emails about scams, you can report those. Although somebody like me hears about lots of scams, and if I reported every scam I hear about, I would spend all day just doing that. And there are a couple of scams that we don't think are being reported very much at all. There's one current phishing email that comes in saying that they have all of your information, all of your contact information, because you have been looking at adult websites or pornographic websites. In fact, John, I got that email and I was appalled, although I knew it did not apply to me at all. And they tell you that they want you to go and get $2,000 worth of Bitcoin to give to them within 24 hours, or they are going to release the websites that you've been to, again, these pornographic adult type websites, to all of your contact information. And there may be people that are truly scared by that because they don't want their friends to know, and they certainly don't want the government to be involved with what they might be doing privately. And so, again, those are the kinds of red flag moments that we're talking about. Another one is don't give out any information if someone tells you that you are getting a refund for your electric bill or that your electric provider owes you money. The same with anything having to do with the insurance companies. A lot of the major insurance companies right now are sending information that you will get a refund from them. And if somebody calls you cold and says you've been driving less, we want to give you money back because you are owed money through your insurance provider. Don't fall for those cold calls and give up your bank account information to somebody you don't know. Typically, if you do get a refund or a credit from your insurance provider, it's going to be in that form. It's going to be a credit toward your next payment, not money put in your bank account. So be aware of the latest frauds and scams. Again, AARP bbb.org/fraudwatchnetwork, you'll get alerts about those kinds of updated scams that are touching so many of our lives.
Well, Mary, thank you. I'm so glad that you and AARP are out there waving your red flag and helping consumers spot the red flags too. So I want to turn to Andrew. Andrew, I know that the BBB also collects complaints from consumers. I filed a few BBB complaints myself in my days. Can you tell us what you are seeing around these COVID scams in Pennsylvania?
Sure. Well, we're seeing across the country, we also have a tool called Scam Tracker. It's a similar program that has a map, and you can focus in on Pennsylvania. You can look across the country and see where hotspots for scam activities are, whether the scam is actually seeming to come out of a particular place or whether it's targeting a particular place. You can find that kind of information in Scam Tracker type reports, and that's bbb.org/scam tracker. Some of the things that we've seen in the over 1,000 complaints that we've gotten since March that have specifically talked about COVID-19, relate to things like employment scams and online shopping, and we've even seen things like puppy scams and government check scams and stimulus scams. I mean, they're really running the gamut, and they're kind of just repackaged normal scams, some with more of a COVID gloss.
Yeah, I saw a perfect quote about this in the New York Times a week or so ago, where they called this current COVID moment, quote, El Dorado for scammers and pure hell for consumers. And I think what you are seeing at BBB and what Mary's seeing at AARP just underlines that. I'd like to turn to Lori. Lori, I'd like you to react to something that the Attorney General talked about in his remarks. He talked about, what I call the trust gap. Consumers worrying about sharing too much information with government agencies, for example, around COVID-19 scams or frauds that they may have come across, or even just something as simpler as giving them their phone number to get text alerts. So you're in a unique position in that not only are you one of the nation's leading experts on this issue at Carnegie Mellon, but you also spent time as chief technologist at the FTC, which, if nobody has seen it before, collects millions of complaints every year from consumers. So could you talk a little bit about sort of the trust gap, and should consumers be concerned about sharing information that might protect them with the government?
Yeah, I think it's an important problem. Information with, but by sharing information with the government when they're sure they're talking to the government, they can actually be helping things. And so the important thing is to be sure you're talking to the government. If you get a phone call and they say it's the government, it's probably not the government. The government usually doesn't call you. However, if you go to a legitimate government website that you have looked up and found, then that is a good place to go and report a fraud that you have been a victim of or know about.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I can't tell you the number of complaints we would get where somebody tells us they got a random phone call and said, I'm with the IRS and I just need your bank account routing information to deposit your stimulus check. So I think the message to, don't necessarily listen to the email or the text message or the phone call you get unsolicited. Like, go to your own browser, surf to CDC or irs.gov on your own is really key. But it brings up another interesting issue with these current moment, and tens of millions of us now working from home full time. It's forced, I think, people who didn't really think much about security to think more about that. People who might not have known what VPN stood for before they had to start using one to log in every day from work, who may not have thought about the password on their home router and what that meant. Could you talk a little bit about sort of what sort of security questions consumers should be asking themselves now that we're all 24/7 online from home?
Yeah, so now's a good time to think about what sort of security you have in place on your home computer and whatever computers and devices, even IoT devices, smart light bulbs, smart doorbells, anything like that, that you have in your home. Because with everybody being home more and a lot more data coming out of the home, then there's a lot of opportunities for attackers to get in there. And so, simple things are to make sure that you have a strong password, you're not using your pet's name as your password, things like that. Making sure that there actually is a password on your devices and not just, whatever it came with. Making sure that if your employer has given you information about securing the computer you use for work, that you're following those instructions. Those are all good things that you should be doing now.
Great, thank you. And fingers crossed that we don't get Zoom bombed during this this event. Mary, one of the things I wanted to talk to you about was something that Attorney General Shapiro talked about with seniors in particular, and the role that social isolation can play in your vulnerability to frauds and scams. So at this time right now where people are maybe even more isolated than they were in the past. I know, speaking for myself, I just went and visited my in-laws for the first time in 3 months yesterday. What should seniors in particular be doing? Are there resources that they can reach out to when they're just not sure? They have somebody calling who's saying, I'm with the government, or I'm, somebody and I just need personal information. Like, what can seniors in particular do to fight sort of this vulnerability that social isolation brings?
Well, a lot of it these days is who can you trust? And the sad part is not very many people anymore, particularly when it comes to something like answering the phone. And it may sound counterintuitive, but we suggest that people not answer the phone, that if they get a phone call, they let it go to their answering machine or their voicemail. And if it's someone who really wants to talk to them, like a relative or a good friend, they will definitely leave a message, or you will hear them and then you can pick up. We are very concerned about caller ID and the fact that the bad guys really know how to spoof caller ID and make numbers come up that look legitimate when in fact they are not. And you cannot trust caller ID. If you have through your phone company the ability to have an alert such as scam come across the readout on caller ID, we want you to trust what the telephone company is saying when they tell you it's a scam. It probably is. And again, if it comes up as a government agency, the government is not going to call you, and that will definitely be a spoofed number. They try to make it look as if they are official when in fact they are not. And so let those calls, again, go to voicemail. And if someone leaves a message saying they are from the government with a return phone number, do not call those numbers back. Independently research the particular number for an agency. You can look at the blue pages of an old-fashioned phone book, or you can certainly look it up on the internet, but don't trust calling back a number that's left for you saying that they are from the IRS or the Social Security Administration, because those people are not going to leave a message in that regard. It is simply a scam.
Thank you. I know, Carl, I think just in the past hour, I've probably gotten a few robocalls here on my phone, and I'm not going to call them back. So thank you for that message, Mary. Andrew, one of the things that people are naturally inclined to do during a time like this is try and reach out and support each other. So I know in my neighborhood, I've seen restaurants starting up GoFundMe pages to try and help, pay some of their employees. I'm sure I'm not alone in wanting to support efforts like that. But we know that there are people out there who want to take advantage of consumers' goodwill and during this time to run charity scams. At BBB, you have some amazing programs around helping people spot and avoid these scams. Can you talk a little bit about them?
Well, sure. We again, Scam Tracker is one. We also have a charity program called give.org where folks can go and look up charities. They're mostly national charities. Some of the local charities are available on our regular website, bbb.org. So people can look up charities and check out the standards against which we measure charities. There's about over 20 of them. And it looks at everything from finances and governance and how the charitable funds are going to be used. And we make sure they have explanations and have appropriate documentation of things. And, we report all of that. So people can use those as tools. Now, more difficult are these new GoFundMe challenges, because they're not charities necessarily. They're people asking for help or people asking for help on behalf of others. And they kind of use the same techniques and tools that charities often do in fundraising, but we don't know whether the actual services, monies, funds are being spent or produced in the way that we would expect. So it's really, that's probably more in the buyer beware category. There isn't really a great way of vetting them, but there are certain things that we can advise consumers to do. So for instance, before you put your credit card into some GoFundMe account or send a payment to somebody through a GoFundMe account, make sure you know the person. Deal with people that if you buy from a local store or shop at or purchase dinners at a local restaurant, talk to them, leave a message. Most companies are monitoring their phone messages. They'll call you back and they'll be willing to discuss, what these things are going to be used for. Look for vague messages. Oh, we're just trying to help our employees get through this tough time, or is that may be meaningful to some, but it may be more meaningful to say, hey, we've got 7 employees and we just can't keep, even though we're doing takeout orders, we just can't keep 7 people on our staff right now, and we really like to help them. And 2 are going through whatever things. So look for the specificity, find out what's going on, because most of the people using GoFundMe accounts are going to be a little bit more vague in their descriptions. The other interesting thing people can do is sometimes there are pictures, and you'll be able to see if you can do a reverse search on the picture by using one of your browsers. You can just Google, for instance, reverse picture lookup, or go to Google Images, and you could search by the picture, and then you could see if that picture has been replicated or used by many different websites many times. You'll know it's not actually a true picture. So you kind of want to figure out what you're dealing with here, and if the indications are that this doesn't look like a legit or real person or real campaign, then find another place to spend your money.
Great, that's fantastic advice. And the website is give.org, is that right, Andy?
Give.org is for our national charities, yeah.
Got it. So Lori, we spent a little bit of time talking about seniors and their vulnerability to scams, but I know as someone who, I think when we were chatting last week about this, you were saying you're spending 8 hours a day on Zoom because you are teaching classes. So you're very familiar, I would assume, with young people and how they're using technology these days in safe and unsafe ways. From your point of view as someone who deals with college students on a regular basis, what kind of scams in particular do you think they should be on the lookout for? Are there steps that maybe young people who are used to living their entire lives online should be thinking about taking to protect themselves from scams, particularly during this COVID moment?
Yeah, I think that young people are vulnerable to many of the same scams that older people are vulnerable to. With students, I would add that there's the extra concern. Many of our students are international students, and they're not from the United States, and so they fall victim to scams that are particularly targeted at that group. For example, scammers who claim to be from the police of the home country of the student is a concern. They speak the language of that student, and the student says, "Oh, they must be calling me from my home country," when in fact they're not. And they are scammers. Yeah, students need to worry about all of these things as well. We also have all of these students who are taking their classes online. They're on Zoom also 8 hours a day. And so, they have this window into their home that all of the people see on Zoom and showing the video. And so thinking a bit about what you're going to put in that video window and whether you really want to show everything that's going on in your house and the other people there is something to think about.
Well, I'll tell you, I have a sign in my kitchen behind me telling my 13 and 16-year-old that, don't go in the kitchen until noon because daddy's recording something. So I totally get that.
I told my teenagers that as well.
Great. Well, I know we're starting to come up on the top of the hour. So I do want to sort of give you all each a opportunity for a few closing remarks before we close out what has been, I think, a really great panel and a really great opportunity for folks to hear from some of the top experts on fraud in Pennsylvania and from around the country. So Mary, I'll start with you. Closing remarks.
Thank you, John. At AARP, we want everybody to remember the red flag moments in their lives. We don't want anyone to fall for a telephone line or some type of phishing scheme. And understand there are tools available to get more information, including aarp.org/fraudwatchnetwork. There's also a toll-free telephone number that people who don't have access to the internet or who simply want to talk to someone about a scam, they can call AARP's hotline at 1-877-908-3360 and again get more information. And to get those fraud alerts over your smartphone, it's totally free of charge. Your information won't be used for anything except the Fraud Watch Network. You can text the letters FWN to 50757 and receive updated alerts about the latest frauds and scams. And like Attorney General Shapiro, we thank you, John, and the National Consumer League for the opportunity and all of the good work you're doing.
Thank you, Mary. Keep up the great work, AARP. You really do amazing work, not only on behalf of seniors, but on behalf of all consumers. So thank you. Lori, closing remarks.
So I just wanted to give a shout out to my colleagues at SciLab at Carnegie Mellon who are doing a lot of research on tracking these scams, tracking the fake news articles, and doing research on how to help people actually protect themselves. So there's a lot of great work and it's on the SciLab website, scilab.cmu.edu. So check it out.
Great. Thanks, Lori. And Andy, bring us home.
Sure. And thank you again for hosting this. This was a tremendous opportunity for us to present our information, but also just to make sure the consumers have yet another ear or voice to listen to, in their journey in the consuming world. But I'd like to close just simply by saying that, this COVID moment is a moment in time, but the scam artists are using this moment in time to just replicate what they've been doing all along. And, when we see a hurricane, when we see a storm, when we see a virus outbreak, when we see any sort of upset in the marketplace or upset in the community, we're going to see people using the very same techniques to find a new way to just tap in to some of the things. The products may differ. Like now we're talking about masks and cures and things of that nature, but the next time we may be talking about roofs and food or water deliveries and some other supplies like that. So people should just be very careful whenever they're in a moment of upset. And if somebody's asking them for their private information or to separate money from them, make that a moment to think about investigating. Go to bbb.org, go to the Attorney General's website. Ask friends for advice. It never hurts to call on all the experts and make sure that you're not going to be foolhardy with your money.
Yeah, and it's certainly a moment right now, and unfortunately, I think this is a moment for scams related to COVID that is, if the media is to be believed on this, we're going to be in for quite a while yet. So I think it's really important that consumers think about the kind of advice that you've heard from our panel today, as well as from General Shapiro, not just in the next few days or weeks, but for months and years to come. It's good advice whether we're in a COVID moment or not, but especially right now with millions of consumers, I think, vulnerable and scammers working overtime to defraud us, that we all sort of learn those red flags that Mary and Lori and Andy and General Shapiro talked about. So if you are a victim of a scam, all of our organizations, BBB, AARP, the AG's office, are great places to file your complaint. We can also go to our website, which is www.fraud.org. I forgot to mention this at the top, but we have a hashtag. So if you have questions for our panel or for General Shapiro that didn't get asked today, please feel free to tweet them. The hashtag is NCL COVID. That's NCL COVID. This video will be available on YouTube after this event concludes. So if you have friends or colleagues who you think could benefit from the amazing expertise that we've gathered today, please look for that, share it widely on Facebook and via your favorite social platform. And again, thank you so much to the panel. Thank you so much to General Shapiro for making time for us today. Stay safe, everybody, and be well.